I am NetMoverSitan. Now, I wasn't seeing this coming, that the checkup was actually Chapter 7.5, Part 1. But it was a welcome surprise. Sometime after the La Manchaland mission, we catch up with Dante and Task Force Damned in the middle of something. Dante was looking beyond the glass window as the others battled furiously inside a large indoor arena. Otis was annoyed at the others, seeing it as pointless for all of them to rush an already staggered and nearly dead enemy. Faust made it clear that she attacked it first, blaming the others' delayed decisions. Yisang apologized, speaking of swiftly disposing of the opponent. Honglu saw it as a great show of teamwork. Dante thought otherwise, seeing them as about as coordinated and coherent as a bunch of drunks being provoked into a brawl, or Heathcliff on a bad day. Without their command, they're about as hopeless as King Bowser when dealing with anything that involves actual thoughts, such as, answering the question, what's 1 + 1? Otis shouted at them, asking, why won't any of them listen to her orders? Heathcliff didn't think much of her genius order as it led to one of the other female sinners dangling from 1/4 of her neck. Otis saw it as a necessary sacrifice to gain an edge in battle. Don Quixote wasn't in good shape, telling them not to worry, seeing it as befitting of a hero to perish in the place of her... She choked before she could finish that, much to Rodier's horror, as Don Quixote fell before an onslaught of enemies. Dante had much to say to them, mostly that they were doing it wrong, but all they could do is watch them make decisions that would make World War I generals look less brain-dead. Dante was prevented from doing so by a researcher, as they've not finished collecting data. Part of that was noting one of them having exceptionally fast emergency reaction speed. Dante was hesitant, but they asked if they could help them now. The researcher asked them to stop pacing as they're almost done. After they were done, he told Dante that they could take control, and so they helped out the others against the Envy Peccadula, who at that time was taking the forms of the Lu Association identities. So mostly blunt force and burning. Now, having Faust's N-Corp identity as a passive certainly helps out, as Lust Resonance is more likely with that team up, which helps get the SP filled quicker. After the battle, Dante awkwardly said that it went well. Yeah, it went well when you were leading them. Then Captain Suckup herself praised their strategic genius, which reminded her of her early career. It's a miracle she stayed alive this long. Dante thanked her, while feeling uneasy. Rodier asked if they had anything to snack on. She's starving after that brawl. That researcher told her that their stomachs must remain empty for the duration of the tests. Next is... Then Gregor regretted not taking Massault up on his offer of massage. If he knew this was coming, asking, whose idea was this? Ishmael recalled that it was traced back to his vacation request, although this would have happened regardless. Gregor protested at this. There was more to it than that. Faust was silent. Dante agreed that there was more to it than that, and it would have made no difference. This all started with Gregor's stretching. This loud crunching sound from Gregor's stretching caught Ishmael's attention. Clearly this was relatively recent, as she nervously said that she didn't know it that a human body could make a sound like that. Gregor confirmed this as he was just doing some stretches, something that he couldn't do now without making noises. This likely it likely happened sometime after the La Manchaland mission. This was alarming to Sinclair. Roger thought that it was the creaking sound of time's ravages, telling Sinclair that Dante had been inverting their time, but even her joints were starting to ache. Ishmael admitted that she wasn't as spry as she used to be, believing that the pain from repeatedly dying and reviving was taking its toll. Okay, why haven't JRPGs with party revival mechanics touched on this subject? Where reviving too much can have less obvious side effects. Well, it would at least have some psychological effects, but the physical effects would largely be undone. Dante agreed that dying can be a pain, and this isn't for the reasons they had, as it's a pain for them to experience the pain of all of them dying over and over again to prevent them from staying dead. This was the point when Hong Lu made a flippant yet innocent comment about their complaints. He asked that, if it was funny how Don Quixote was totally fine, even though she's hundreds of years old. She's the oldest of all of them. Yeah, she's at least 200, although likely much more than that. And Dante felt awkward suddenly. And Don Quixote was feeling uneasy. Gregor and Ishmael didn't know what to say. Dante saw that Honglu's mention of a rather sensitive subject silenced everyone. Then Gregor admitted that he thought that they wanted to take some time before bringing that subject up. But Honglu forced the issue. Honglu recognized that he must have made things awkward. He didn't realize that everyone was so sensitive about their age. Don Quixote told him that it wasn't something to concern himself with, to not be so. But before she could finish the denial of the truth, there was someone there who would gauge the social atmosphere of the bus and not give a about it. He angrily shouted at them to move away from his designated seat, threatening to hit them with his baseball bat if they didn't. Ishmael was annoyed by his lack of care, asking herself if he even remembers what just happened. Sinclair suggested that Don Quixote get some payback for his harsh treatment of her, suggesting that she unleash her bowel-loosening terror side. Roger liked this sparkle in his eyes, and thankfully for Heathcliff, she was fond of his company. She wouldn't be violent towards him unless he did something that she didn't approve of. Crossing the line as far as she was concerned. Heathcliff, ignoring this, noted that now that it's over, they should shut it and keep talking to a minimum. Ishmael saw this as something that could be defined as crossing the line. Gregor asked if he was the only one thinking that it's time that they got the thing. Honglu wanted to know what he meant by that. It was what they tried a while ago, but didn't get to enjoy due to some unforeseen issues. The issue thought they meant a death match. Gregor wasn't talking about that, asking if they remember that they played volleyball by that big body of water. That was 7 months ago when they were in the back streets of District 21. The mud flats full of mutant crabs, where the ball that was found was destroyed by a barrier separating the back streets and the nest areas. This was before they set sail across the Great Lake in order to deal with Ishmael's unfinished business. Massault deduced from the contextual clues that he's making a request for a vacation. Roger agreed to this, hoping to go to a spa so that they can relax, get massages to loosen up their muscles. Ishmael's expectations of their employers were much lower than Roger's. Don Quixote then recalled that Massault had given quite the exquisite massage, who made it clear that he had enough knowledge of human anatomy to do this, which, as Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 Judgment Day would point out, would make whoever had this knowledge more efficient killers. Yi Sang, however, was critical of his service in this regard, as following that, he was unable to feel anything for many weeks, where he deduced that Massault's idea of pain relief is to remove the capacity to feel anything at all. Now, I can see Urusis seeing this as a benefit to her, as it would have combat applications, to not feel pain, even when injured. Anyway, Faust, after a pause, told them that the time was there. She called over Virgilius! He knew that day would eventually come. Charon knew as well. Sinclair asked why everyone was so serious. Faust confirmed Roger's observation. While time inversion works in keeping them from not staying dead, fatigue can't be alleviated. They need to verify the status of each of them. Dante wanted to know what could require such a build-up. Faust told them that in other words, and Virgilius continued that sentence by saying that it's time for Limbus companies, and Charon made it clear how terrible her acting skills were by saying that it was a dramatic gulping noise. Then both Virgilius and Faust said together, "Regular checkup!" They clearly know how to take the don't they? This surprised Dante. According to Virgilius, they got a call from the higher-ups a while ago, requesting that they would be sent in for a regular checkup. Faust noted that it was repeatedly delayed due to several limiting circumstances on their end. The most major one likely being their voyage across the Great Lake for at least 4 months. I mean, it'd be hard to do the checkup there, even if they were to stay around a port ship. Virgilius told them that they were obnoxiously hounding them for quite some time, getting tired of explaining their absence. Heathcliff wanted to know what they were talking about. Virgilius told him not to be so on edge. This was a regular occurrence at most corporations. Dante, as far as they were aware, they never experienced it themselves. Seeing it as checking to see how they're all doing health-wise. They were expecting Ishmael to be fine with it, but she was showing signs of PTSD. Not as bad as it was before her unfinished business in the Great Lake was dealt with, but it was still pretty bad. Dante thought that she'd lecture everyone about their experiences and how things worked outside of Limbus Company, but Ishmael was struggling to speak. Rodia thought that she was gearing up to explain what it was, telling her that she had 30 seconds to wrap it up. But Ishmael's trauma was too real, and she made no effort to hide this. Yi Sang noticed this, and it made her more obvious regarding this. Virgilius was more understanding of Ishmael, as he heard that some fixed offices or associations employ varying methodologies when it comes to checkups. depending on their characteristics. Well, I doubt that one of them will involve, for example, take the Shi Association. I doubt they'd make their fixers prepare a Japanese meal with their katanas as part of that. Apparently, one of the offices that Ishmael's a part of, their checkup reeks of more social Darwinism than usual, as they were locked up until only one was left standing, where the blood of her colleagues was the only key to escape. Dante wanted to know what she had to go through for that checkup. The abject horror was not just experienced by Ishmael, but Gregor as well, but he was more calm about this. He's asking if they're prepared to go through the regular checkup, no matter what happens in the process. Are they prepared to endure through everything that... Clearly his checkup was worse than Ishmael's, due to it being done by the old G-Corps, which was painful enough when he was given his biomimetic arm. And this was before he and the other biomimetic augmented troops were sent into battle. Heathcliff didn't know why Gregor was looking pale. Sinclair didn't know why this was such a big deal. He didn't think it'd be that bad. He recalled having an annual checkup in school. Radia wanted to know what kind of checkups. He told them that they'd be put in the same room, measuring heights, weights, running some basic fitness tests. Don Quixote, a bit sensitive about her height, asked why they needed to measure that. Urtis understood reason for this. It was to gain a full knowledge and analysis of each soldier's status. This intelligence is indispensable for officers to have. Sinclair saw her as going off topic. This angered Heathcliff as, he asked if it doesn't explain about why they need to know that. Why they need to, found it necessary to spray everyone with chemicals just to see if someone had lice in their clothes. This was likely during your time in Wuthering Heights, where he was treated worse than a dog. Dante understood this to be a rough checkup. Urtis saw them as asking questions with the most obvious answers. She was wondering when they'd test them. Her grin was assertive as she marched up to them. She was waiting for this. She saw the true purpose of that checkup to be to elect a true authority amongst them. Yisang was asking if by true authority she's questioning who should be leader. Urtis wanted to make it clear that she wasn't questioning Dante's authority. That wasn't in question, as far as she was concerned. Dante and they understood that much. This was regarding who was most fit to command them in the event that Dante was unavailable. Sinclair thought this to be Ishmael or Faust. Honglu thought so too. Urtis saw that they had a lack of cohesion, which was why they always failed to face their enemies as a team, underprepared and taken by surprise, expecting them to drop to the ground and give 500 push-ups whenever their superior commands them to do so, willing to sacrifice their well-being and lives for the sake of the glorious victory of their allies. Seeing it as missing in them, Ishmael was asking who she was talking to, never mind having any desire to argue with her. Honglu told them that in short, it's to put them in a small room and making them fight to the last one standing. This made everyone fall silent, and yet gives more hints regarding his family. A family that would make the Addams family have a look of horror by how toxic they are. And this is a family that's so outside reality, every day to them is Halloween. As Honglu might have had to go through that at some point. Now, Ryushu was happy at the idea of Battle Royale. which strengthened my suspicion that she signed up with Limbus Company for fun. Heathcliff wasn't going to turn down this kind of fight, hinting at his history in the backstreets, either as part of the Dead Rabbits or possibly when doing some underground fights. Even Ishmael was willing to do this, relishing the opportunity to bash his face in and be able to get away with it. Dante isn't thinking that this is it, and Roger asked where they're heading to. Faust paused for a moment and told them that, after briefly saying that it's a battle royal, the checkup is at Limbus Company HQ, and Yisang wanted confirmation of this, and Faust gave it to him. Ishmael's interested in visiting HQ after a whole year of being hired. Faust told them that they should be right on time upon immediate departure. Don Quixote was unprepared for this, asking her to allow them time to prepare provisions. Ishmael asked where HQ is, hoping that it's not far from their location, and their current location is likely still District 16. Faust told her that it's currently a secret, and it's located somewhere inaccessible to Mephistopheles, which might be located on the moon, an orbiting space station, a flying sky station, or possibly underground, as that would... well, those would certainly be definitions of inaccessible by Mephistopheles, as with most it would involve a specific flight mode, and with the underground... yeah, Mephistopheles isn't capable of travelling that way. Not without making some gaping holes in the ground. Clearly HQ didn't want to receive unwanted guests, much as little is known about the head, as an attempt on their lives in both cases is more difficult if you don't know where to strike. Gregor was frustrated at this. How can they get there if she's not going to tell them where it is? Urtis was asking Faust if she's suggesting that they board the warp trains again. Don Quixote was traumatized by her own experiences there, vowing not to board them again, as it was the first time in 200 years that her true nature was awakened, and she saw the suffering of the innocent there. Thankfully, Faust told them that they wouldn't be doing that. Ishmael asked if they were using the back doors. Heathcliff thought that would be safer, as did Yisang. But the doors are not very reliable in where they lead to. It might not take them where they want to go, and that's if they aren't stranded on the other side. Sinclair questioned if this was a good idea. Heathcliff would rather take the bloody train instead. At least he won't remember what happened when it's done with. Ryushu still wanted Battle Royale. Faust, ignoring this, mentioned that further research was necessary to ensure safe transportation to the intended destination. Urtis asked if she made modifications to the back door. Faust saw this as close, but it's more accurate to say that the back door was used as a reference point. Dante asked, when did she have time to do research? She was with them the whole time. Faust told them that she and the After team communicated regularly with the new Wing Aspirant company during the spare hours that she had, regarding stabilization efforts, regarding the back door. Gregor assumed that this was a Wing Aspirant company that intended to fill the position left vacant by Lobotomy Corporation's fall in District 12. Faust told him that he wasn't off by much, but it's to replace the ever-declining W Corps. Now this was surprising to Gregor. This made sense as, well, at least to Ishmael, as stories of W Corp's decline has been spreading more and more. The vultures were circling. Massault spoke of newspapers saying that there's a possible management crisis at W Corp. Speaking of the mysterious disappearances, Yeah, likely during the time of the library, thanks to Elena the Blood Red Knight and Jaehyun the Puppeteer, and more recently with Cassetti, the sixth kindred bloodfiend, making his own private kingdom within the warp train. Urtis understood that this wing aspirant company is planning to take over District 23, even before it's fallen. Seeing this as, well, it's quite usual seeing that a scheme was being worked on, allying with ambitious parties, asking if HQ was planning to start a war of the wings. Faust claimed to not know. Well, she at least didn't have these details. Yi Sang advised not to make rash predictions. W Corp was mired with troubles, both internal and external. They were desperate enough to hire Limbus Company. It was only a matter of time before it crumbled. Speaking of how inefficient their singularity was, which brought ruin to those that failed to overcome it, such as needing time siphoning and a save state loading to make it a viable long-range transportation method. Faust saw that their research efforts were quite efficient and successful. The mechanisms were similar to the back door, but without the corridor. It directly connects one door to another or a portal. Gregor asked if the side effects were all resolved. Faust said no, as there were similar difficulties as sometimes the accuracy wasn't good, or if it's active for too little time, it resulted in severing parts of the body of those travelling through, as one part was still on the other side and the other was travelling through. Much work was needed to stabilise this. As in the earlier days of this, there was pentasection instance. Now the instants are limited to bisections. Now this didn't inspire a lot of confidence, even though Yi Sang saw this as improvement. Dante both saw... well, they both were equally awful to them. Don Quixote didn't want to be separated from Rocinante upon arrival at HQ, especially as this would bring Sancho back to the surface, as they'd rather not do that unless they needed something powerful taken care of. Yes, Sancho might come in handy next time they ran into Ricardo or a similar opponent. Virgilius was seemingly not caring about this, seeing their idle chatter as a sign that life had been too uneventful lately. Urtis didn't know what to say. Then Virgilius told them that the research arrived while they were wasting time, and outside was a large and unfamiliar vehicle. Roger saw that it had no windows. Virgilius saw this reaction as tiresome, telling them to get off the bus and into that vehicle. The vehicle that they entered was unfamiliar. The interior was mostly metallic, filled with an unusual setup, and on the opposite side of the entrance was a massive door. Sinclair seemed to understand what this was. Faust completed that by saying that there was some indispensable assistance from P-Corp with developing that device. Sinclair seemed to understand what this meant. Don Quixote understood that she was working with Cesara. Faust was silent at this outburst, and Don Quixote wanted to talk to her about the contract's completion, specifically of what she accomplished, seeing it as unfair to her to meet her by herself, making her annoyance clear. Faust told her that her concerns would be taken into account next time, and seemed relieved as she was likely expecting the worst reaction to this. Don Quixote was now more focused on seeing what Limbus Company HQ would look like. According to Faust, there was numerous reasons why they were yet to be allowed into HQ, but she saw no point in listing them all. Gregor Well, Gregor was relieved that they don't have to sit through another lecture. Then she told them that the primary reason was there were several limitations to bring them to HQ due to frequent transnest movements and irregular scheduling of their missions. Well, it would be more difficult to go to HQ when you're in the middle of the Great Lake, where there's no control over what is the safe path. Roger nervously asked, why did she say all that if she was going to explain anyway? Otis wanted to know more about the, collaboration with Peacock. Roger knew what was coming. Faust explained that Peacock's singularity can be summarized by the following 4 words: expansive space warping technology. Sinclair remembered that Cesaro mentioned that the principle of that was similar to how La Manchaland worked. Dante confirmed this as La Manchaland was much bigger inside than it looks on the outside. Ishmael was meaning to ask this. Don't other wings make liberal use of different kinds of space-expanding singularities? Seeing it as a bit too mundane for P-Corp to call space manipulation its unique thing. Faust saw this as quite the intelligent question. Gregor saw this as a nice compliment. Faust confirmed Ishmael's suspicion. One example of space expansion technology that isn't P-Corp is Mephistopheles. The ultimate purpose of P-Corp space expansion technology is to create the safest space in the world. Now, this is interesting, as this reminds me of the abnormality known as the Shelter from the 27th of March, which was likely created around the Smoke War. It was made by Company P, which might mean P-Corp. The description of what the singularity is purposed is way too similar to be easily dismissed, as it was made to protect against external attacks. The safest space in the world, although P-Corp doesn't make the outside even more hopeless, where it makes the shelter the safest space in the world by making the outside more dangerous. The abnormality protects against all forms of damage and regenerates HP and SP. It will also hide them from being pursued by breached abnormality. But if they stay in there too long, the quip-off counter of a containment unit at random will lower to 0, and this will continue until they leave the shelter. As for P-Corp's commercial products, besides canned ice cream, it's a perfectly protected construct, the interior sheltered from what's outside regardless of how much of a battering the exterior receives. Sound structural integrity no matter what. Interior safe from any and all harm. Now, how effective this is, it depends on how much is willing to be paid for this. That vehicle is able to withstand a lot of punishment, and has enough room for more than 13 people. Rodier asked if dimensional trunks or containers also transport things to other dimensions. Sinclair was looking disturbed. Yeah, those two would know that, as they have Deviat Association identities. Rodier wanted to know what was getting to Sinclair. He heard a creepy story among the other children at school. It's where Deviat Association fixer delivered to a house, then looks away for a second, and a curious child crawled into their courier trunk and he stopped there. It kept him up all night for a week. He couldn't stop having nightmares about that scenario where Gregor tried to reassure him that sometimes a story is just a story. Ishmael wasn't so sure of that. Faust confirmed that the story was likely accurate, as there are several regulations added to Hana and Deviat Association rules to prevent cases of people being stored in dimensional containers. Likely because it's lethal to living beings. Yisang saw similarities in W-Corp's tech, where it transports humans to a different dimension, although they're packaged in a safer manner. Faust added that they operate on the same scale. Roger then moved on to the fact that as long as they have this vehicle, they can access HQ. Ortiz saw this as more convenient regarding logistics of communication and supply, although she asked how they intended to move that. Has that detail been dealt with? Faust said no. To establish a more tangible level of communication with Limbus Company HQ, vehicles that used P-Corp Singularity and the aspirant W-Corp's technology will gradually be installed in nests across the city. Ishmael assumed this to mean in every nest. Virgilius clarified to her that by saying that it wouldn't be, as the technology is still experimental. It's astronomically expensive to install and maintain, implying that it will likely be only installed wherever they're going in the city, as in where the Golden Bowers would be. Faust then activated the portal. The giant door trembled and made a loud noise. Don Quixote wanted to know why the gate was shuddering. Yisang explained that energies would be routing towards the gate. When the gauge was filled, the door slowly opened. Faust told them to enter it now. She walked into HQ as if she was walking into another room. Dante told them to follow her inside. There was a series of bizarre and incomprehensible noise of machines, coupled by a low droning noise. They then arrived at Limbus Company HQ. There were people there wearing all kinds of odd outfits. Heavy doors were opening and closing. Dante was feeling an odd sensation. Faust told them that they were in the floor of the LCE department. Now this was new to Dante. Roger was hoping that they could walk through the front gates one day. Now this is interesting. P-Corp's Singularity sounds like some kind of multi-dimensional engineering. If they worked with P-Corp and T-Corp, they could probably make a box that can take them anywhere. All they would need is a space-time hobo living in it. Then the researcher from earlier, or later, depending on the perspective, wearing the EGO gear of the shock centipede, with messy hair and glasses, was silently looking at them. There was some back and forth between Faust and him, until Heathcliff he shouted at them to stop waiting for something to happen and remember the concept of introducing themselves. This researcher decided to do so, as no one else was going to. He was Honenheim, chief researcher of Limbus Company. Now, he was likely named after Paracelsus, a prolific Swiss scientist, alchemist rather, who was born as Philippus Aurelius Theophrastus Bombastus von Honenheim, who was apparently the father of toxicology, and had the idea that humans needed a balance of certain minerals in them to maintain their health. Anyway, Faust corrected him by saying that he's the chief researcher of the LCE department. He corrected her by saying that he's the chief researcher responsible for all of Limbus Company. Faust corrected him again by saying that the only reason why he retains that role is because Yisang and herself have been excluded from the research personnel files, due to their statuses as sinners. Someone must stay behind to continue the research. Hong Lu assumed that they were friends. Faust wouldn't go that far. They're acquaintances who routinely and unwillingly maintain a regular level of communication with each other. He was in agreement for the first time since they've acquainted. Their department has reached out several times to her to remind them of that regular checkup. Faust told him that they're constantly on the move, which made it difficult for them to give an immediate reply. He should be aware of this detail. He was aware of this, along with the fact that they keep giving him the same reply over and over again, like an answering machine. Dante was unsure how to deal with this. Then Hohenheim understood that Z was in front of Dante, manager of the Damned Dozen. Dante would say, "Nice to meet you," but he can't hear anything that they're saying. Thankfully, Faust translated. Hohenheim saw it as grueling and arduous work to be in a position of leadership, especially when communication issues come into play. Sometimes he can't help if his researchers and himself don't seem to speak the same language. Although in your case, many that you interact with are the intellectual equivalent of gym teachers. Ortiz saw how odd the clothes were of the others. Hohenheim introduced Martin and Elisa, researchers directly under his command. Sinclair asked if they were wearing gear extracted from abnormalities. Hohenheim was happy to see someone recognize this. Ishmael asked if they're being scavenged from Lobotomy Corporation. Messalt saw that there are similarities, but there are noticeable differences. Hohenheim confirmed Messalt's observations. They have their own brand of extractions. Faust knew that EGO gear and Limbus Company style was being made, and this was the first time she observed this. Ishmael understood that abnormalities were stored there. Dante could sense them, along with distortions and peccatula. Faust confirmed that this was the LCE's purpose, to contain and research them, along with extract EGO gear. LCE liked the meaning Limbus Company extraction. She then observed the shock centipede EGO gear as if she was a harsh judge in a fashion contest. She saw a few imperfections in the finish. The level extraction was quite acceptable. Hohenheim saw the input as accepted. It's the product of thousands of repeated experiments and failures, all to extract it to an acceptable quality. In the end, he did it, as he always did. Ishmael was restraining her annoyance, asking if he was sure if he wanted to take the credit when his team was standing right behind him. Alyssa, who was wearing the Arbor Blossoms moth. EGO gear, yes, the Arbor Blossom moth, including fiery hair ties to her twin tails, told her that they're used to it. Heathcliff told them to off. He was unable to keep in his anger at those self-absorbed. He's about to get ready to smash some skulls. He just wants to get on with the checkup so that they can get back to the bus. Hohenheim agreed. There is much they must cover, as this is the first ever regular checkup performed as a group since their employment. Faust didn't want to waste any more time, wanting them to get started. Hohenheim's first task for them is to assess their abilities in response to emergency situations. Ishmael saw him pressing something. Dante registered what was said, but it was too late to react to the walls of the laboratory separating and sliding into place. They realized that the damned dozen were locked in a hold, isolated from everyone else. Ishmael saw this as an ambush. Hohenheim saw this as the purpose of the test, to measure their behaviors and response in case of a surprise attack, Dante asked Virgilius if this was discussed beforehand, and according to Virgilius, he wasn't let in on this either, advising them to just let it happen. He'll find a room where he and Charon can sit down and enjoy some nice tea, telling them to find him with Faust when they're done. This wasn't very reassuring. Charon wanted cake. Marton, who was wearing the lantern Egeo gear, told them that they had some leftover cake from the last office party, leading them to a nearby office room. Dante decided to get this checkup done, and I assumed that this was when they fought the Envy Pecatula, and now we're right back up to date. They also fought a variety of other Pecatula. Well, the checkup started quite violently, didn't it? Until next time.
Hail the rabbit!